Please rewind this cassette.
Hey guys, welcome to Box Office Addict 88, where I'm going to be breaking down the weekend numbers and just talking about what's going on with movies right now and all that bullshit. So, this is an interesting weekend because there's some huge disappointments here financially and some questionable decisions within the industry right now. Also, there's some weird fucking trend with my channel all of a sudden where there's all these Stephen King videos that I didn't plan on doing. Like, I have the It Chapter 2 review, and then I did a Misery review, because I wanted to talk about Misery on Halloween, and then Doctor Sleep comes out, and I'm going to be talking about it now, so it just feels like I'm some Stephen King channel right now, which is, not the case, but it is what it is. Uh, Doctor Sleep's the movie I want to focus on this week, because quite honestly, I don't give a fuck about Midway. I'm a fan of the original Midway. It's a decent enough movie. It's a fun action movie for its time. The footage is really nice to watch. I don't know what the hell they were thinking with this big budget remake of Midway. I just don't. It just seemed like a dumb idea from the beginning. I don't know what Lionsgate was thinking of this. I want to focus on Doctor Sleep for a reason though. One, Mike Flanagan. This is a guy that I've been following for a long time. I saw Absentia years ago at a film festival. And I met Mike Flanagan, and I said, "Hey, your movie was really good, but it seems like you didn't have enough money to really go where you wanted to go at the end with the creatures and special effects, but it had really good characters and atmosphere. It was a well-directed movie, well-acted movie." And he told me that's exactly what it was, that he didn't have the resources. And then I saw Oculus, and it was him, and I kind of didn't like the third act to that. Although I really like Oculus quite a bit. I think the second act is great and cerebral. And I've seen Gerald's Game, and now that I've seen Haunting of Hill House, which I really enjoyed in the middle, and I thought the middle of that was the best thing Mike Flanagan's ever done, I hate the last episode. So I'm just going to say that Mike Flanagan's not good at endings. But the thing is that it felt like Mike Flanagan was getting to this James Wan place where, he had Hush on Netflix and Gerald's Game on Netflix. He had all these Netflix deals, and then here you go, we're going to give you $50 million to do a sequel to The Shining based off the Stephen King book. And everything seems set up for Doctor Sleep to be a hit. I think the estimates across the board were $25 to $30 million opening weekend. I honestly thought it was going to open higher. I wouldn't have been surprised had this opened to 35, 40 million, especially with the success of Stephen King stuff right now, like It. Now, to be fair, Pet Sematary only opened at $21 million, and it didn't end up making, it made $112 million worldwide, I believe. I'm just going off memory most of the time with this stuff, so forgive me if I don't have exact numbers. But this is a bad opening weekend. They're going to lose money on this movie. This is a real shocker. Deadline's trying to break it down. There's going to be a lot of, armchair quarterbacking, Monday quarterbacking on this. And we can discuss this later when you guys are watching the video. I don't know. Why did Doctor Sleep not perform well? Was it marketing? Was it a lack of awareness that Doctor Sleep, the book, wasn't that big of a hit? Is it because the original Shining isn't as popular as we think it is? Now, the original Shining made $46 million on a $22 million budget in 1980. Now, that's actually a pretty good box office. The biggest issue with that film at the time was that the budget was big. A $22 million film was a big, big budget. It cost more than Raiders of the Lost Ark, to give you some context. It was a bigger budgeted film than Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I think cost like $8 million. No, $18 million. The movie cost more than films around that time that were much bigger movies. And I'm not like saying, oh, Kubrick wasn't good with budgets. I'm assuming they thought The Shining was going to make 50, 60, 70 million dollars. And now I don't necessarily think that The Shining though isn't a film that isn't known. People tried to compare this to Blade Runner 2049. The thing with Blade Runner though is that Blade Runner was just a bomb. It gained a cult status on home video, but I never thought Blade Runner would become this blockbuster. I would argue with The Shining though that The Shining is one of the most famous films on television. I think on video it has to be one of the most purchased and rented films of all time. The merchandising of The Shining. I mean, everywhere I've ever gone, I've seen posters or t-shirts of Jack Nicholson coming through the door. So I think The Shining has made hundreds of millions of dollars. over the last like 30 something years. I think The Shining is a very successful movie. Ewan McGregor maybe not having star power. Perhaps that's the thing. He was too busy banging Mary Elizabeth Winstead, which, one can't blame a man for such a thing. But what I'm getting at is that Mike Flanagan, it seemed like he was getting set up for this big moment coming off Hill House, which was successful, and now he was going to have this big hit. And just has to be a real, like, reality check, a real crash for this guy that, like, okay, I'm about to be the next big guy in horror. I'm about to have my James Wan moment. And it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen for Warner Brothers either. Now, they've made so much goddamn money off Joker that they can afford this being a disappointment. But still, this just shows you that sometimes when you have a project that has everything, all the check marks, it's a well-reviewed movie. It seemed like it had a lot of awareness on social media. I remember seeing that people were asking me about this movie at work or friends I had. They said, "You going to go see Doctor Sleep?" But there was no audience for it. People are going to blame release date and marketing, but I don't think those are as big of a factors. It should have still opened better. So it just must mean that people were not interested in this movie or Danny Torrance coming back. I also think the length didn't help this movie. This movie's 2.5 hours long, and I don't think horror fans typically like that. And I think it suffered from that as well. I think being 3 hours long hurt that movie financially. Let's get to some other movies before we really break down Doctor Sleep, though. So let's look at Zombieland Double Tap, which is doing very well. Made 66 mil domestic and 101 million worldwide. It should pass the first film, which I think made 102 million worldwide. So domestically, the first film made 75 million. So Zombieland Double Tap, they waited a long time, but it's doing fine. Let's look at the Addams Family. That's made 155 million worldwide. Not quite doing Hotel Transylvania numbers. Jojo Rabbit went in wider released in 800 theaters. It made 3.9 million. It's actually doing pretty well. Parasite from Bong Joon-ho is made 11 million, which was actually great numbers for a foreign language film. I'm trying to see if I missed anything. Downton Abbey, very successful. Let's see where that's at. 181 million worldwide. That did very well. Very good for them. You know what? Good for them. Okay, Motherless Brooklyn from Edward Norton is also doing very poor, 7 million on a $26 million budget. And let's move up to Maleficent, which had a huge drop. Not this week in particular, 35% drop, but in general, it hasn't been holding that well with its $36 million opening weekend. However, it has made 431 million worldwide. So depending on the budget on this film, the first Maleficent, I believe, cost about 180 million. So if this film, if it cost around that, if it cost 150 to 180 million, I doubt they spent more than that. If this movie cost 200 million, they were insane. This should be able to make 500 million worldwide and not be a bomb. It's certainly a domestic disappointment, though. Let's look at Joker, which is a huge hit at this point. Joker has made $313 million domestic and $986 million worldwide on a $55 million budget. It is easily Todd Phillips' highest grossing film now, and it will pass $1 billion. So this is just one of the biggest hits of the year all around. Terminator Dark Fate, as expected, had a major drop. This is just turning into more of an embarrassment. 62% drop, 10 million this week, and this movie is done. Only 199 million worldwide. This is a $185 million film. And when you include marketing, I mean, holy shit, they are going to lose a lot of money on this movie. This isn't going to make as much money as Genesis. So the Terminator franchise has to officially be dead at this point. Like, let it die. Kill it if you have to. This is bad. And bringing Linda Hamilton back and everything and just these numbers being so horrible. For Tim Miller, this is a huge hit coming off Deadpool. He loses some stock in Hollywood. This is a big hit to James Cameron as well. I talked about this so much last weekend, but it didn't bounce back. It's a disaster. It's one of the biggest disasters of the year from a financial standpoint. Last Christmas, a holiday love story, which seems like it's coming out a little early, has made $14 million worldwide. I don't even know what the fuck that movie is. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. Playing with Fire from Paramount. $12 million opening weekend. What the fuck is this movie? A crew of rugged firefighters meet their match when attempting to rescue three rambunctious kids. No, thank you. Holy shit, that sounds awful. Let's look at Midway from Lionsgate. Well, $18 million worldwide so far. I believe this movie cost like $150 million. I didn't even see a trailer for this damn thing. This will not make, I mean, it might perform well with older audiences and male audiences. If they were going to make this, they should have made this movie for $60 million at the most. It's got a good cast. A lot of the actors in it I'm a fan of, but wow. Horrible opening weekend. What a shitty number one. But let's talk about the big one here, Doctor Sleep. This is the one I want to get at. Now, I'm not saying Doctor Sleep's an outright bomb because it did have a good international opening of 20 million. So the movie has a $50 million budget and they put a lot into the marketing. Domestically, it's hard to say that this will make $50 million. It depends on the word of mouth. I'm assuming it's going to make like 40 something million. It should be able to make 100 million worldwide, but with that budget and so on, I don't think they're going to break even. I think the break even point had to be $200 million. And I'm expecting they thought this was going to make even more than that, like $250 million to $300 million. They put the money into it to seem like it was going to get that kind of result. So this is a big hit for Mike Flanagan, and this is another Mike Flanagan movie where it's a decently reviewed horror film, like 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, like his other films. Uh, you know, good character work, a good villain, a lot of stuff from The Shining, sort of like Ready Player One. They use a lot of the iconography, but it just did not attract audiences. Even that poster is trying to make you nostalgic for like, do you want to go back to the Overlook? And the curious thing is that a few months ago, I saw The Shining in a local theater in a 35 millimeter film print. And when you go to see The Shining in the theater, that hotel really does trap you. You become insane like the characters. You start to get lost in the maze of the hotel. The hotel is a maze as much as the maze that's outside of it. And you start to kind of lose your mind like the characters. You really get, it kind of just makes you go crazy. You feel like Jack Nicholson. When you see it on the big screen and you're like, Jesus Christ, you realize how big the location is. You realize just how big those hallways are and stuff like that when you get to see it. You could get this too on a large television with Blu-ray, obviously. And that's the thing about this. I figured that people cinematically would want to go back to the Overlook, and see that stuff again and go back to the hotel and its recreation of that. I thought that was going to be the real appeal of this. I don't get why it's so long. I think Mike Flanagan was being a little indulgent here. Perhaps this should have went to Netflix. Perhaps Netflix should have released this as like a mini series, like that's 6 episodes long, instead of going theatrical with this. I think it would have been more successful. And they could have spread the money out a little bit more, like, given like $3 to $5 million to an episode instead of, spending $50 million on a movie that has to be 2.5 hours to try to keep it in range with the source material. Instead of making what this should have been, which is probably a 2-hour movie. Now, I know the original Shining was a 2.5 hour film, but I don't think this is comparable in that sense. I don't really know what happened here. People are trying to figure it out. People are going to say, I know people in the comments are going to say, it's because it wasn't a good adaptation of the book and book fans knew. I don't think that's fucking true, and I never think that's true when a movie does bad or good. I don't think book purists affect the box office that much. I don't think it's because The Shining isn't relevant, which is what some people are going to say, that, oh, The Shining isn't as famous as people think it is. Art house film buffs think it is. That's not true either. I think in particular it's a shitty title. Doctor Sleep's a really bad title. It was a bad title for a book. It's a bad title for a movie. I don't think Ewan McGregor's a movie star. He never really has been. Even as Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's never really been a guy who can open a movie. Even though I'm a huge Ewan McGregor fan, by the way, and I loved him in season 3 of Fargo. I've been a fan of him since Trainspotting, but I just don't think he is a movie star. And the trailers weren't great. I think the trailers left a lot to be desired. I think they really should have, sold the Shining thing a little bit more. I'm not saying this is a bad movie, and I'm not saying that it was not worth making, because I want studios to make 2.5 hour horror films and letting the filmmaker do what they want. But this is a big hit for Warner Brothers because it's showing that what they have with it, which is just was way more successful as a property, Pennywise, I feel. People really wanted that. Uh, it just shows them that they can't just release these Stephen King books and have a hit. Think about 1408. 1408 performed better than this. 1408 had a $25 million budget with John Cusack and opened at 20 million and made $71 million domestically. It did better than this movie. So you can make a successful, modestly budgeted Stephen King adaptation. And I'm a fan of 1408. But for some reason, it seems like the Stephen King thing isn't as solidified as maybe studios thought. I think it was lightning in a bottle, and it kicked off all these Stephen King adaptations. And I just don't think it led to what people thought it was going to lead to, where all of these Stephen King movies were going to be successful. People wanted an It adaptation that had these special effects and cinematography and the acting that they'd been wanting for a long time. Nobody was really screaming for a Doctor Sleep movie. Nobody was really like, man, I really want to go back to the Overlook Hotel. Stanley Kubrick made that movie. We got the movie we wanted from a visual standpoint. Now you could debate the merits of it from an artistic standpoint or as an adaptation, but visually you got the Overlook that you wanted. Despite what Stephen King said about the whole movie. But you do not get, you just don't, I don't know. To me, it just feels like there was no desire for this movie. And they really hopped on, they were really hoping that the whole Shining aspect would deliver the box office. And I think that they were relying that Mike Flanagan had all this success with Netflix, that of course he's going to have a big hit movie right now, but perhaps Netflix is where he belongs, because Oculus, it made money, but it wasn't a huge hit. And didn't he do the Ouija movie too? That made money. I'm correct, right? He did the second Ouija movie, and that made money. That made like a lot of money. So he's had films do well, but it's always been lower budgeted films. He's never made a big budget film like this. And I think he got confidence with Hill House, and they thought that he could do it. And that wasn't a loyal adaptation at all. That has like nothing to do with the fucking book, even though they bring up Eleanor. I don't really know what to say here about this. This is a mystery. It's a multifaceted equation, if you will, why Doctor Sleep didn't do well. But my final say on this is that this should have been on Netflix, and it should have been like a mini series that was like 4 to 6 episodes, and then it could have been, 3 or 4 hours long. I think it would have been good to do like 43-minute long episodes and do like 5 of them or something. Instead, they released this movie, and it was the movie everyone thought going into the weekend was going to be the number one movie. I was expecting to come on Sunday, get home from work, and be like, oh, Dr. Sleep, $35 million opening, 90 mil domestic total, and so on, 200 million worldwide, but it's not there. Maybe the word of mouth can save it, but when your per theater average is $3,600, that is not a good sign. So Dr. Sleep, we can officially put this movie to sleep. Yeah, I said it. Fuck you. All right, Black and Blue, who gives a shit? Gemini Man. How did they not know that was going to be a bomb? What were they thinking? What a stupid fucking idea. Hey, it's 2 Will Smith. People will love it. Let's look at it, Chapter 2. Let's see where that ended up. 462 million worldwide, so it's made a little bit more money. Still a disappointment, though. Toy Story 4, 1,073 million. That did very well. The Lion King, let's see if that made any more. I don't think it did. No, it's pretty much wrapped up, too. 1.1 billion, though, on the fucking international total. That's a great international. Let's see if Once Upon a Time in Hollywood added some more money. It seems like it's going to end up with that like 371 million worldwide. I think 141 million is going to be the final domestic total. I think it's done internationally. Oh, because yeah, the Chinese release, that's what screwed it, is that Tarantino wouldn't edit the film for China. So if it had been released in China, it would have passed $400 million, you would assume. So they probably put a lot on that it'd be a $400 million film, because that's what a lot of analysts have said was the make a profit point. I don't think it's a disappointment. I mean, it could have made more money domestically, and it certainly didn't make as much as Django. But it's not a bomb by any means. I just think they spent too much money on it. I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood should have cost like $70 million or $65 million. I don't think it needed to be $100 million movie. I get why it was $100 million movie, but I think for the kind of project it is, they should have told Tarantino, which they never do with guys like him or Fincher. They need to just go like, "Hey, you need to cut this budget down by like 20 million so we can make more profit off this." And he could have filmed this movie for less. And I'm not saying he had to compromise, but I saw the movie a couple times, and that did not need to be $100 million movie. That was indulgence, in my opinion, which I don't have a problem with. Tarantino has earned some indulgence, but to what degree is the question. When your movie isn't making 450 million worldwide, should they've given you that? Rambo Last Blood, really bad box office too. 86 million worldwide on a $50 million budget. This film did not do well. It didn't do nearly as well as the Rambo movie that had come out a decade ago. That was a big disaster. Angry Birds movie 2 bombed domestically. So a weird year at the box office. A lot of films bombed that were unexpected. A lot of disappointments. Nostalgia is not working anymore. And weird releases like Midway. But I will say, I thought that with everything happening with horror movies, the pedigree and all that, I think they would have had a better opening weekend had they went with October. I think if Doctor Sleep had come out in October, it could have reached 20 million. I really think they could have got that extra boost around Halloween and had a $20 million opening. But it still would have been disappointing all around. And I just don't... I don't know. Warner Brothers screwed up on this one. It didn't work out for them, but luckily Joker turned into a film that exceeded all expectations from a financial standpoint. So Warner Brothers is fine, and It Chapter 2 still made a lot of money. So like I said, they can afford some bombs right now. And Disney right now doesn't have anything major. They're pretty much waiting for Star Wars, but Maleficent is doing decently. Zombieland Double Tap did very good, actually. It should be able to pass the first film, which, the first film came out 10 years ago and so on. So it's not really a movie. You can't compare them, but, they didn't spend a lot of money on this movie. So overall, that it was a good idea to make a Zombieland 2, although it was always a good idea to make a Zombieland 2. Are we going to have to wait 10 years for Zombieland 3 when Woody Harrelson's like an old man? He's already pretty old. Hell, Jesse Eisenberg looks 40 nowadays. How the fuck old is Jesse Eisenberg, by the way? Huh. Alright, guys, well, that's Box Office Addict. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think about Dr. Sleep. What happened? Did you see any of these movies like Playing with Fire and Last Christmas, these family movies? And what do you think about Terminator just being a bomb? This is really bad. And, yeah, something like The Addams Family. But I will say I'm very happy for Parasite. This has become his biggest film. Made 106 million worldwide. This is his highest grossing film. I've been a fan of him for years. I do think he'll win the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film. And God, I've been a fan of him forever. Memories of Murder and The Host and all that. So good for him. I'm so glad that's a big success. And it's cool that some stuff like The Lighthouse is doing well, and Jojo Rabbit, these smaller films, these risky projects. Jojo Rabbit has Hitler in it. I don't think it's going to I don't think it's going to turn into a big hit, but I'm like seeing that the art house crowd seems to be showing up, and mainstream audiences still seem to only be interested in superhero properties and not so much other franchises, including Stephen King. So it's a weekend of disappointments. It's a weekend of disappointments. And a restructuring, because the reason that the box office matters is this affects the decisions that Hollywood is going to make over the next few years. So I'm saying this with absolute certainty. All of these movies and how they're performing, Midway, Doctor Sleep, Terminator, this is going to change the trajectory of where the box office and the business goes and what gets produced going into 2020 and 2021. I don't think we're going to see a lot of war movies, and I think we're going to get a slowdown on the Stephen King adaptations. And I also think that the Terminator franchise will probably be done at this point, or at least be gone for a decade, because you can't bounce this back. And I think we're done with Maleficent. And all I could see is that we're going to continue to get superhero movies like Joker, even though it's not a superhero movie really, but we're going to get comic book movies, I guess is what I should have said. And hopefully this is a sign that there's an audience for foreign language films because Parasite's actually doing really well. So I'm hoping we get more stuff like that, and I'm happy for Sony and Zombieland Double Tap. I think that's good. I think if they'd released it a few years ago, it would have made more money. But still, I'm happy for that. I'm a fan of the filmmakers and the cast. And Jay and Silent Bob reboot is not doing that well at all, and Kevin Smith is just kind of done. I feel like he's trying to make that comeback, but it's just not happening. He was here in Columbus not too long ago at the Studio 35 cinema. I didn't get a chance to go see him, but he did mention us on the Joe Rogan podcast, which was cool. He said Columbus is a jewel. I wish I could say the same about your movie, Kevin, but I just can't. But I appreciate the compliment of where I live. All right, guys, I'll see you for Box Office Addict 89. We won't get to 100 episodes by the end of the year. I want to try to do the show more frequently. We would have already been past 100 had I been more consistent with it. We were only doing like one of these a month, but we're getting close to that 100 mark. So for everyone who's been a fan since the beginning and misses this being a live stream, we're like, where the fuck is Please Rewind Live? Please Rewind Live didn't go anywhere. I did want to do that as a monthly show. I've been trying to schedule shit with Cordery. Me and him never seem to match up on time. I guess I just got to do one without him until me and him can figure that out. Or get another guest on. I don't know. Maybe I'll have some of you guys on at some point. But you have to audition yourself, quite frankly. I'm not going to have any boring pieces of shit on. I kid. But yeah, for any of you guys who've stuck with this show so long, I want you to know that Box Office Addict is a good show, in my opinion, and I don't want to leave it. It's a unique take on the box office. It's really analytical. It deep dives into it more than I think a lot of other people do. Talk about this very generically. We stay more consistent with the movies that have been out for weeks. We don't ignore films that have been out for a long time because they're not relevant anymore. And that's something that makes it special, and I think it's one of the best things I've ever done on this channel. And I created this show because it's the kind of show I always wanted. I always wanted a show where somebody really was very analytical and detailed and lengthy with box office breakdowns. And I never found that. And the live stream, it just sort of at some point, it turned into more of a show where I was performing and talking to you guys, and it really wasn't about the box office anymore. And that's what inspired Please Rewind Live. It's like, well, yeah, I can just do live streams and have all this without the box office being in the background. Box Office Addict turned into something else, and really, what I always wanted the show to be was just something that looked at money with movies and broke it down and tried to figure it out. And that really was the fascination and the kind of show I wanted it to be. So I think the last few episodes have been its most purest form, and I think the best version of the show. And I want to continue this throughout the year. So it's one consistent thing that'll be on this channel. There's reviews, there's essays. I know I'm always lackluster in my content release. I'm not a machine, mainly because I have a very strenuous job that asks a lot of me. But Box Office Addict will always be here, and thank you for sticking with it. And I can't wait for us to get to episode 100 together. And I can't wait to get to the Rise of the Skywalker box office at the end of the year. I might do that one as a live stream just to give you guys a little present, because I feel like that's a big enough movie to warrant such a thing. But if you listen to the show, you're probably an addict yourself, and thank you for being addicted. I will be on the street corner selling box office to you guys for very low prices, including thankless blowjobs.